Don't know what to do with MachGaogamon down at 1? Well, I got you for this one. Okay, Digi-Egg cards, 4 copies of Gaogamon, and I think this is one of the best new blue eggs to be running for many blue decks because it gives you jamming. Now, a very important note about this particular card is that it was mistranslated in the English where it reads as if your opponent has the same Digimon with same sources, you still get jamming, which is not the case. If your opponent has a Digimon that has the exact same sources amount as this particular Digimon, you will not get jamming. It has to be less in particular or no Digimon on board, then you get jamming, which is still really good because jamming is always great. It's one of MirageGaogamon's major weaknesses from before when it comes to attacking, to be as safe as possible. But now with this, no need to worry. Okay, as usual, starting with level 3s, I got 4 copies of the EX4 Gaomon. It has the on-play, both players draw a card, which is kind of good when it comes to early cycling if you need to find more pieces. But also with its inheritable, mainly is because at your turn, once returned, when an effect adds a card to your opponent's hand, you get to gain a memory so that you can sort of continue your turn and make more combos, and gaining that memory can help you a lot and a ton, especially when you're climbing up the stack as well at the same time. Then I like to play 3 copies of the Searching Gaomon from BT11, just on play, revealing top 3. You get to grab yourself a Gaogamon, Digimon in its name, and a blue Tamer, which is always great if you can effectively get 2 hits because both of them are equally as important. And its inheritable is when attacking once per turn. If you have a Tamer in play, you get to bounce a level 3, which is kind of nice sometimes, but not always necessary. But keep in mind, you do trash your sources when you're searching with this card as well, which a lot of us, I can admit, we always tend to forget. But anyways, we move on next to Gaomon, which is one of the new really good level 3s to include in this deck. Its floating capability is really good when it comes to the inheritable. It has the starter main phase. You get to strip any source your opponent has, and then you get to sort of not be able to be blocked for the turn too. Really nice secondary level 3 to have for the deck for sure. In case you didn't know, I actually opened up my very own merch store, and there you can find some awesome keychains, stickers, and memory markers like these. They even come in bundles, so be sure to check them out. And as always, thank you so much for the support, and be sure to stay tuned for more drops coming in the future. Then I got 2 copies of MachGaogamon just as my major floodgate of this particular deck. But after a bit more playtesting experience, I just feel like Syakomon might be the better one just because there's a lot of popularity when it comes to training boost cards in particular. We'll talk about more in the text choices there too. Now let's talk about our level 4s. 4 copies of the EX4 Gaogamon. This one, when Digivolving, you get to bounce one of your opponent's level 3 Digimon back to the owner's hand. Really good for getting rid of floodgates, essentially. Anything that blocks memory, anything that blocks your cost reduction, which you do a lot in this deck as well. So really crucial there. And then it has a your turn once return inheritable. When effect adds a card to your opponent's hand, just like that EX4 Gaomon, you get to gain a memory back here too, so they can extend your turn, make more combos, make more plays. Then I got 3 copies of the BT14 Gaogamon. Just always really nice when you Digivolve. If you don't have atomics, you get to play one out for free, is always really great value. And then it gives you all turns effect of inheritable. If your opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, you get extra 1000 DP, which is also kind of nice, but you don't really necessarily need it just because you have jamming now thanks to Gaogamon. Then for the rest of the level 4s, I like to run 1 Kumamon right here, just my personal choice for a hybrid. Sometimes you can Digivolve on top of your Tamer, go for an extra swing if you need to, kind of nice, and you can kind of build your stack from there too, if you ever don't have a rookie ready to go out from raising there too. And just a friendly reminder, if you guys ever want to see first draft deck lists and updated versions of the particular decks that I showcase here on the channel, make sure to join the AVAULT Club, and I really appreciate it. Definitely subscribe, turn on the notification bell to stay tuned for more MirageGaogamon decks for sure. That's it for our level 4s. Let's talk about our level 5s. 1 copy of MachGaogamon right here. MachGaogamon is now restricted down to 1 just because of how incredibly powerful it is when you can potentially bounce your opponent's Digimon, sort of clearing their board and gaining a bunch of memory back, effectively making like a 1 cost level 5 Digivolve rather than its 3 cost because of all that combo synergy. And it gives you that when attacking once a turn, if your opponent has 8 or more cards in your hand, you get to unsuspend, which is a very good instant and generic inheritable for you to make multiple attacks whenever. For our replacement, which is the most important thing, I'm actually going to be playing 4 copies of AVAULT. This arguably, at times, I feel like it's just actually better than any MachGaogamon you can play, simply because it gives you security +1 your turn as long as you have 8 or more cards in your hand. It's very easy to achieve with the blue decks. You draw a lot, you search a lot anyways, and being able to do so, being able to check twice gives it double the explosiveness than it has before, I think. Just by doing that, you can make multiple checks in one turn. You can actually OTK your opponents way quicker than before, which again, I'll talk about and show you guys exactly how it's done when it comes to the combos. It's nice that it has a main effect of its own jamming, but you rarely actually want to be swinging with it just because you want to make sure you can unsuspend with your top end combos overall. But again, we'll really emphasize later in the combos on how good this really is. Then, of course, 3 copies of Zudomon, the perfect hand trap ace Digimon card for this deck, so that it can potentially sometimes sit on a level 4, you can take out your opponent's sources and bounce their Digimon back to their hand, potentially blast Digivolving for free, is really great value because of that. You guys can run between 2 to 3. You guys can also sub other cards in, which we'll talk about in the text sections later too. That's it for level 5s. Let's talk about level 6s. Of course, we still want to be playing 4 copies, maximizing the BT14 MirageGaogamon. It's when Digivolving effect bounces your opponent's level 5 or lower Digimon. If nothing gets bounced, you make them add a security to the hand. Then it has the all turns once returned effect. When an effect adds a card to your opponent's hand, you get to gain a memory for every 4 cards that your opponent has in their hand. And keep in mind, this is all turns, so that it's really good at sort of floodgating or sort of disrupting your opponent's turn when every time they try to draw or search, which makes it very difficult to play around. Sometimes the earlier that you can get into this guy, the more disruptive it gets because it really limits your opponent's plays. At the same time, this really helps you extend your own turn plays as well because you combo and synergize a lot with your bouncing effects all at the same time. So you definitely want to see this at your main boss Digimon as soon and as quickly and as frequently as possible. Then I like to run 1 of the BT14 MirageGaogamon just to have its evade, but mainly with its when Digivolving effect, we can bounce opponent's Tamer, which is kind of nice and clutch in certain matchups, which is really good. And being able to do that, we can also play a Thomas for free afterwards too. It's just as a secondary level 6 to get into sometimes as sort of like a tech level 6. Then we move into our level 7s, of course. At least the 3 copies of the burst mode here. You do want to see it as often as possible because it is your game sort of ending combo, the boss Digimon that lets you attack multiple times, bottom deck your opponent's hand to make them lose a ton of advantage, bounce anything when it's Digivolve, gain a ton of memory as well at the same time, being very effective both at paying its full 5 costs and retaining turn, or even burst Digivolving by returning the Thomas back to your hand, and you can do a lot of crazy stuff, make a ton of attacks again, and this is your main win condition when you get into it, and you normally go for the game winning plays when you do. That's it for all of our Digimon. Let's talk about our Tamers. 3 copies of Thomas, really good as your main memory Tamer, but also letting you draw when you attack with a Digimon that has Gaomon in its name. So you and your opponent will draw. You guys can see the main synergy it has with burst mode, so that you can add more cards to your opponent's hand, gain a lot of advantage, shuffle something back again, unsuspend, make more attacks, and also help you find pieces in the early stages too. Then we got 2 copies of the good old BT4 Thomas here. Lower cost, not a memory tamer, but on play lets you draw 1, and as long as it has a main effect where your opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, you get to suspend this tamer to unsuspend one of your Digimon with Gaomon in its name, so then it can make multiple attacks as an alternative way to unsuspend, because unsuspending is this deck's main key mechanic. Then let's talk about all of our options now. Very simple. 4 copies of mental training. It is your main searcher of the deck. You want to be finding your pieces through this, reducing your Digivolution costs, climb way faster because of it, and you definitely want to maximize it at all costs. And same goes for blue memory boost. If you don't see your mental trainings, you play blue memory boost, you rack them both up, you try to build and find pieces until you build your perfect stack for it, you go into it, you pop off with a lot of value, and again, I'll show you how it all works in the combos, which is very straightforward. And then last but not least, 2 copies of Full Moon Meteor Impact, just as our main removal tool overall, being able to bounce stuff, gain memory back at the same time, really good card, just as a main bomb and defensive play too. All right, tech choices. As for a different Digi-Egg, I still want to mention the older Wanyamon, just because sometimes when I play Bukamon, it does feel like there's a bit of lacking draw power than it used to have. So if you ever have a Tamer setup, or if you want to play a 5th egg, Wanyamon is actually pretty good because it's giving you that draw power. Again, really crucial to find some more pieces as you're going, which is always really nice. Then we have Syakomon, like we talked about earlier when we showcased the Madoki Betamon. I might contemplate just switching those out completely to play this Syakomon right here, because mainly training boosts are really popular in the current format, in the current meta as well. So being able to stop that as a floodgate can come in handy more so than compared to against the other decks. Instead of playing Kumamon, you guys can play Lanamon here, which also gives jamming herself. You can slide something underneath when you Digivolve, so you can kind of gain like Inheritables, which is kind of neat because of that. So that's an alternative hybrid choice. Then of course, we got other MachGaogamons. You guys might be thinking it's crazy because we don't play the other MachGaogamons, mainly because this build, I really wanted to just focus on the AVAULT for the explosive OTK security +1 combos, which I feel like these MachGaogamons are not really there to fulfill for that, but it's still pretty good if you want to go for searching consistency, because the BT11 gives blocker and extra DP, and both of them give you that all turns once per turn. When the effect adds an opponent's card to your hand, you get to unsuspend this Digimon, and it is all turns, so you can sometimes kind of protect your stack from being attacked, which is kind of neat. And then as for the other one, basically when attacking, if your opponent has 8 or more cards, you can't switch the target, which is kind of neat to sneak in against certain matchups as well when they have redirects or blocking and whatnot. Then we have Ice Wall. Because we're really just doing searching consistency, we're not really needing the Ice Wall as much as before, but if you guys want to play Ice Wall, feel free to like put one and swap out like another Full Moon Meteor Impact for it. Totally up to you guys, but there we have it. And then of course Solrai, still a very decent card to strip sources against certain matchups. Taking out of important, Inheritables is really what's mainly there, and also stopping your opponent's Digimon that has no sources for attacks is also pretty good because of the wide board meta too. So really up to you guys when it comes to that too. Alright, combos and how to play this brand new version of MirageGao. Kind of similar to sort of an OTK style, you really want to be setting up. So when it comes to your opening hand, seeing a rookie is very important, either your Gomamon or your Gaomon, which essentially lets you Digivolve, which is the one that you want to build into your stack. Otherwise, seeing your other Gaomon, this is the usual one that you actually want to be searching rather than Digivolving. But most importantly, other than these cards, what you really want to be seeing is of course, potentially your level 4s, your 5s, and then your 6s, and then your 7s, and your Thomas at the same time. Seeing your stack all the way up is really great, but what I also like to do and see is memory boosts, trainings. Seeing multiples of those are equally just as good because they're going to give you a lot of return value when you're ready to go for those big turn combos all at the same time. Because if you don't see your 4s, 5s, and 6s, don't worry. As long as you're seeing these, you get to search for it. Otherwise, this Tom is also pretty good because you get to draw 1. Of course, always hatching your egg, Digivolving, I guess ideally will be your Gaomon right here, and you're just basically playing these cards and search as much as possible. Sometimes you're ready to move up and you want to control the board a little bit, you can always Digivolve into Gaogamon that bounces your opponent's level 3, so then it disrupts their sort of any floodgates that they might have or anything, which is always going to be really good, so then you can use these afterwards to follow up to go into your level 5s. Otherwise, if you don't see this Gaogamon, seeing the other one is just as good, because if you Digivolve into this, you get to play a Thomas for free. Either Thomas for free is always going to be value, whether Memory Tamer or the one that lets you draw 1 and then unsuspend, as long as your opponent has 8 or more cards in their hand, is also there really good. It's not too bad to sit out as a level 4 these days because you have hand traps with ace cards. You can bait them opponent with Zudomons. If they disrespect it, you go into Zudomon and bounce their Digimon and strip their sources back to their hand at the same time, and it's immediately free level 5 out here. So if you want to play outside aggressive, depending on the matchup, it works out. This is definitely one way to do it. But if not, sometimes I just like to stay in raising and continue to build and go into an Arrow V like this and sit and make sure I have Thomas's set up. Sometimes you might be even started as a level 3 because if you have enough memory boosts and mental trainings, you might start your memory at 3, you can immediately push out, you can use a mental training, go into Gaogamon, use blue memory boost to gain memory, Digivolve into Arrow Digimon, and then go into a MirageGaogamon afterwards, bounce something or make your opponents as a security, which is almost the most value because then they only have 4 security left and you're basically set up for lethal, especially when you have these Thomases here. You gain some memory back with MirageGaogamon. You can immediately swing with MirageGaogamon for 2 checks, depending on what Thomas you have. If you have this one, you can go for that. If not, even you can actually just go straight into the burst mode if you can, depending again which Thomas you have. But let's just go say you only have this one, swing 2 checks, and then you can also suspend this Thomas to unsuspend, and then go into burst mode, return this Thomas. If your opponent has 9 or more cards, swing, make them add a card bottom deck to from their hand, unsuspend. That's basically 4 checks you did there, and then you swing for game, just like that. And that's the OTK explosive combo. Otherwise, sometimes when you have this Thomas, can then immediately go into this one. At this moment, if they have 9 or more cards in their hand, you swing, bottom deck 1, unsuspend, and then you swing again. Thomas, both players draw a card, they're back at 9, bottom deck their last card, unsuspend, and then that's 4 checks again, swing for game, just like that. You guys can see how powerful and how simple it is to get into this burst mode, to get into this combo where you can just OTK your opponents out of nowhere, and that's usually your linear strategy. Sometimes if you have Gaogamon, if it's ever in threat because there's security bomb or whatnot, you can always play the Gaogamon back out, which gives you floating, which is really good and really important in this meta, because being 1 turn behind without a Digi-Egg can be very detrimental, because if you have, again, set up these cards alongside, and once your Gaogamon comes out, you can quickly rebuild. Although you may not have jamming this time, but at least you can still rebuild quickly enough to go for those combo plays afterwards the turn, if the opponent's not able to remove that Gaogamon. So they can go for those swings again, unsuspend, and repeat the same thing all over, which is really good. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes you might ace your opponent with Zudomon, then you do the exact same thing. Go into MirageGao here. Sometimes it's really nice. You can also sit here in the early stage of the game. Your opponent might still be searching, trying to find the pieces. This will disrupt their turn and make you gain a memory, and then you get to pass and limit their plays during their turn. If you ever burst Digivolve into burst mode, you can make your aggressive checks, and then at the end of the turn, it gets trashed. Then you can still sit here with a MirageGao and continue to disrupt them just like that as well. So really, really cool, very linear, again, straightforward strategy, very easy, simple to understand, very explosive and very powerful just because of those massive attacks, thanks to the new card I substitute AVAULT for the MachGaogamon that's at 1. So if you haven't done so yet, be sure to watch the gameplay to see this deck in action as we OTK our opponents with these explosive combos right here, right now. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. You guys have a great day, great night, wherever you are. See you next video. And this is Vault, signing out.